Our next participant is Kim Witczak, International Drug Safety Advocate and Speaker, serves as Consumer Representative on the FDA Psychopharmacological, Pharmacologica, whatever, I can't pronounce these things, Drug Advisory Committee. Ms. Witczak.
Great. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Senator Johnson, for hosting this panel today. I also wish to acknowledge the panelists, especially those who bravely told their stories of great personal harm and tragedy as a direct result of these vaccines. It takes courage, commitment, and a deep desire to show up and speak your truth, especially when many forces don't want the world to see this part of the story. You may be wondering why I care so deeply about this issue. Unfortunately, I know only too well the high price of a failed drug safety system. My journey started 18 years ago. I like to call myself the accidental advocate. I never set out to do this advocacy work. On August 6, 2003, my life forever changed. My husband of almost 10 years was found hanging from the rafters of our garage, dead at age 37. He wasn't depressed, nor did he have a history of depression or any other mental illness. He had just started his dream job with a startup company and was having difficulty sleeping, which is not uncommon for entrepreneurs. So he went to his doctor and was given the antidepressant Zoloft, off-label for insomnia. 5 weeks later, Woody took his own life. At the time, there were no black box suicide warnings on antidepressants. So it became my mission to educate and help change the label. Almost immediately, my brother-in-law and I started coming out here to DC, meeting with the FDA, Congress, and even helped with the Energy and Commerce subcommittee investigations that ultimately led to congressional hearings. Eventually, we did get black box suicide warnings added in 2004 for kids and 2006 for young adults. To think this was 13 years after the FDA first held hearings on antidepressants and suicide in 1991. How many lives were destroyed and families torn apart before the FDA finally warned about the link between suicide and SSRIs. At one of our first meetings with the heads of FDA, same ones that you are talking about today, we asked why the agency wasn't curious and planning to investigate, especially if someone who had never had depression went on to hang himself. Just like the NTSB investigates after a plane crash. I would have thought the FDA would have wanted to get to the bottom of what was going on. But FDA officials instead told us, oh, these stories, AKA my life, are just anecdotes. They didn't see suicide or suicidality happening in the initial company clinical trials. Initially, I thought this was just an isolated incident with antidepressants. Soon I realized it was a bigger systemic problem with our nation's drug safety system, a system driven by commercial interests and compounded by issues such as lack of transparency, conflict of interest, undue influence, and politics within the FDA and CDC. And then there's just the plain sad fact that most people prefer to talk about the benefits. The benefits of the drugs, the side effects or harms, that's just plain, that's a downer. Ignorance is bliss until you're the one that it impacts. When the state and federal governments began to push this mass vaccination program, I followed the situation with great interest. Trumpeted as safe and effective, the vaccines were positioned as the only way out of this pandemic. If you dared to question the science, the safety, or public narrative, you were censored or labeled as spreading misinformation or called an anti-vaxxer. It is mind-boggling to me when you put a product out in the world, especially one that's been rushed through testing and review, and used by billions around the world, that the FDA and other regulatory agencies wouldn't establish a robust, proactive safety monitoring program as part of the rollout. It's frightening to think that the FDA may not have an army of clinicians reading through the hundreds of thousands of reports into VAERS, or even responding to all of you that took your time to reach out to them. As a member of another FDA advisory committee, I can tell you that almost every new drug that we are reviewing in the recent years has come to us using a fast-tracking mechanism, much like the EUA track of the vaccines. The FDA priority is to approve drugs and get them on the market quickly with limited trial data. Safety is usually considered after the fact. During PDUFA negotiations, I have long advocated for an independent safety review and monitoring board. The people who approve the drugs and vaccines should not be the same people who are responsible for monitoring safety. The FAA does not investigate plane crashes, the NTSB does. The world of drugs and vaccines needs an NTSB. Finally, I want to briefly touch on mandates that are affecting all of our lives. This is not a red or a blue issue. This is a human rights issue. Where there is risk, there must also be choice. There's a dark irony in that the current era of patient-centered care and shared decision-making, neither patient-centered care nor shared decision-making are present in the conversations around vaccines and mandates. People should not be coerced or bribed to choose between their freedom to bodily autonomy or their livelihood and being injected. This is a human rights, social justice issue. Public health may be a population-based approach, but we need to remember we are treating individuals, and a one-size-fits-all does not always work. People dismiss harms as rare. Well, when you're the person who is harmed, it is your 100%. It is your reality. Unfortunately, I hear from people every day that learned this the hard way. They wish they knew of the potential risks before their lives were forever altered. No one should ever have to ask after the fact, how come I didn't know? We are not anecdotes. And I just want to say, I want to know where the mainstream media is. I want to know where FDA is. I want to know where government agencies. It is horrible listening to these stories, and they should be on record for not being here. So thank you.